All righty. Well, we are in the week before Jesus dies in the Bible. And Matthew's telling us all the things that Jesus is talking about. And remember, we said last week that he's probably trying to get everything in that he can to just explain things, explain what's going on. Last week we talked about the wedding banquet and how it was a picture of how people got invited into the kingdom, and that the king selected who he invited. And when he sent his slaves to invite the guests, he expected them to want to come. And of course, they didn't want to come, and they turned their back on him. And that was a very unusual response to any wedding. So, but we know that that's a picture of God inviting the Israelite nation to come to his kingdom, and they turned their back on God. So it just shows Israel's response. So, of course, God then withdrew his offer, but for us, then he invited the other guests, which is us, the Gentiles of the church. So, but realize that Israel still remains God's chosen people. They did not lose their position. They simply lost that opportunity. Also, I remind myself, yes, the nation did not accept Jesus on that day, but any individual had the opportunity to accept Jesus. So they weren't not allowed to follow Jesus. They just had a choice to accept him or not accept him. Just like today. The Lord, though, will return again, and he's coming for his kingdom. He's coming for his children later on. Paul tells us that in Romans 11:28.
From that standpoint of the gospel, they are enemies for your sake, but from the standpoint of God's choice, they are beloved for the sake of the fathers. For the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. For just as you once were disobedient to God, but now have been shown mercy because of their disobedience, so these also now have been disobedient, that because of the mercy shown to you, they also may now be shown mercy.
Well, we thank God that the Gentile world got included into the kingdom. And just as we're shown mercy, Israel again will be given another chance. You see, when God made the covenant with Abraham, it was irrevocable. It was an irrevocable covenant, and there were no conditions on it. It depended entirely on God's faithfulness, not on Israel's faithfulness. What does that sound like to y'all? It depends entirely on God's faithfulness, not Israel's faithfulness. How about us? Our relationship with God, and the reason it is once saved, always saved, is it doesn't rely on our faithfulness. It relies on his faithfulness. And when we made that covenant with God, when we asked him into our heart, at that point the Holy Spirit came in. It's irrevocable. The Holy Spirit's there. And it depends entirely on God's faithfulness at that point. The future generations of Israel will receive that promise, and God will return and show them mercy again. The Lord said that last week, the Lord said the many are called, but few are chosen. And so we're going to talk about what that means. Does anybody want to gander a guess before we talk about it? Many are called, but few are chosen. Put it in the context of Israel. Who was called from the kingdom of Israel? The king, all of them. All of them were called. But how many of them came? Few came. Few accepted the call, if you will. Men like the apostles and the Samaritan woman, they received the good news gladly, but they were in the minority. And so only a few within Israel were chosen to be included in the wedding feast. Put that at the end of the sentence, and that helps kind of explain it. So many were called to the wedding feast, but few were chosen for the wedding to come to the wedding feast. The rest were set aside. So only a few chose to be included in it. They chose, and by accepting Christ, they chose to attend the wedding feast in the inn. Israel didn't respond as a nation, but God set aside Israel and allowed the Gentiles to come in. You know, as Satan's observing this, he's going, all right. You know, he's seeing what's going on. He's seeing that Israel is getting ready to kill Jesus as soon as they can find a legitimate reason to do so, or an illegitimate one. And so Satan's over there thinking, I'm about to win. I'm about to win. And and some people onlooking might have thought Jesus was failing in his ministry, but his ministry was not failing. Everything that we're talking about was part of the plan, and it was going right on schedule according to God's plan. As a result, and the result was that God expected, intended, and foretold through his prophets exactly what was going to happen. Romans 11:7.
What then? What if Israel is seeking, it has not obtained. But those who were chosen obtained it, and the rest were hardened. Just as it is written, God gave them a spirit of stupor, eyes to see not, and ears to hear not, down to this very day.
Okay, only those in Israel on whom God had mercy, like the apostles, the Samaritan woman, were invited to the wedding feast. It says the rest were hardened, and what that really means is God just simply left them in their sin. He did not change their heart. So he left them, they were on a track, and he let them be on that track. And it had the effect of hardening their hearts, though, because once they didn't accept that, the nation became embittered against Jesus, against Christianity, so much so that even today, some Orthodox Jews, when they hear the name Jesus, spit. They did in that day, and even today. They just became embittered to the Messiah being Jesus. Paul says they became enemies for our sake. So the Israelite nation became enemies to God, so that God could legitimately set them aside so that he could invite us into the kingdom. You see, God had that covenant with them. So had there not been a reason to set them aside, he couldn't have set them aside. Y'all understand that? He could not have not followed through on the covenant. And then, you know, had they followed God and accepted the Messiah, he would have followed through and brought the kingdom right away. Hebrews 2:9.
But we do see him who was made for a little while lower than the angels, namely Jesus, because of the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. For it was fitting for him, for whom are all things, and whom are all things, in bringing many sons to glory, to perfect the author of their salvation through suffering.
I find that last verse so profound. Jesus was perfected by his suffering. It's almost incomprehensible to me. It very plainly says it, to perfect the author of their salvation through suffering. His sinlessness was proven in his willingness to obey the Father and suffer for our sake. And by his suffering, he became the author of salvation. By his suffering, he became the author of salvation. Hostility, Jesus endured from the Jewish nation, was meant, and God was going to use it to cause good to happen. And the good that was going to happen is he's bringing the Gentiles in.
So this verse here is just hard to read when it says that he might taste death for everyone. That's a tough one.
Yeah. And again, you know, I put that in context of Jesus is God. God, in the form of Jesus, is going to suffer and then be crowned with glory and honor. But first came the suffering before that crowning. And God was going to work all these circumstances together for the good. The Lord turned the hostility and the violence against his Son into a blessing for us and the world. And can you think of a more tragic moment in human history than when the Creator had been subjected to mocking, hatred, torture, and then death at the hands of the very beings he created? Never has there been a greater injustice, and never has there been a greater good achieved. Now hear that? There's never been a greater injustice, but there has never been a greater good achieved since the dawning of this world. Jesus tasted death for everyone, which led to his glory. And for those who received the benefit of that payment, they also received glory by being accepted into the kingdom. The Lord raised Jesus up to glory to demonstrate his victory over death. God is not silent when bad things are going on, even though it may feel like to us like he's silent. He is in charge of the greatest of deeds, of providing the greatest of rescues of all human time for those who accept him. So again, one of the most horrific things that has happened is the greatest thing that has happened. Y'all are tired tonight, aren't y'all? Y'all are barely uttering a
I am absorbing every word.
Okay, good. I might need some minimal encouragers, you know. Shake your head.
I'm really into it.
Okay.
Can I get a name?
I know. But I'm telling y'all are just really silent, and I don't know if it's...
somber topic.
It is a somber topic.
We're just absorbing.
Okay, that's fine.
My mind is not wandering. I am
Trying to figure it.
Okay, well, the question is it just that boring coming out of my mouth? And that's...
It is heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking. Even though I know it had to happen like it happened, it doesn't hurt my heart less.
Well, and hey, what other God would choose to die to receive people unto himself?
Well, they're all fake.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like
But,
he defines sacrifice. Like he is the ultimate.
and, you know, so all these other, you know, and I think Muslim, you know, just automatically, there is no other God that sacrificed for his followers. And when I say God, I mean people that worship, you know, a religion.
Mm-hmm.
There is none other, yes.
And no matter what we're going through, he's been through it too, and he's right there with us. That's just amazing to me.
Yeah,
He would
oh yeah, well let me tell you what happened to me.
Have you forgotten?
You understand?
He went through all of that and never sinned. Never sinned. Never had a bad thought. I mean,
Well,
Even though we grieved his heart profoundly, even though we grieve his heart today profoundly, because we all at moments turn our back on him and choose the world. I mean, that's what sin is. That's what our human nature is. That's what we battle against, but we do it anyway.
easy word.
Sometimes knowingly I do it. You know, knowing it's not okay.
Selfishness wins. And it never did for him.
It didn't for him, that's right. God is not silent and is not standing by during this tragedy. He is in charge of the greatest of deeds, of providing the greatest of rescues for all humans that accept him. God wants us to understand this from his perspective. And he realizes, like he said, this is so somber. And from a human perspective, this really makes little sense. And it's not okay with us because it's not fair. And we want that sense of fairness. It's not fair. God deserved none of that. He did nothing but give.
He should have had to prove who he was. Like, there's so many things that were unfair. And even though he passed every test, he still failed in their eyes.
In their eyes, yeah. When Jesus was being killed, he was laying down his life for us. And the leaders weren't willing to, I can't read let me just read the sentence like I have it written. The leaders aren't willing against or controlling, winning, not willing. If I read the right word, it would make sense. The leaders, y'all, are thinking that they are winning at this point in time. They're fixing to get rid of Jesus, okay? But they're not winning. But they think they've about got it sewed up. They're fixing to trap him. They're going to get him. But they're not winning. And what happens to Jesus is exactly, like we said, what God had planned. Rather, Jesus is using their sin to accomplish his plan. Okay, y'all, does God ever use our sin to accomplish his plan? If he takes all things together, that includes my sin. And so, sometimes do you ever look back on life and go, well, what if I had made a different choice and not made that mistake? But God knew I was going to make that particular mistake. And as his kid, he's going to use that in my life in some way. And it's going to be for my good. Now, it may not feel good. I don't mean that. But he's going to use it for my good. God intended for Jesus to die. This was but for a good purpose in the end. It's the most magnificent love story from God's point of view. We have to overcome our human perspective with God's perspective and trust in the areas that are hard for us to understand or explain. If you had to explain this to someone else, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't even make sense to us. We know it because we've been taught it, but why would God do that? Because he loves us. Notice I said the things we can't understand. You know how these topics come up every so often that we have over and over again, and we can't ever find out what the truth is because we don't know. We just don't understand the big picture. But we have to trust in the areas that we can't understand. And because of all that we do understand, God makes it, I'm going to say, easy for us to trust. Maybe I should say easiest for us to desire to trust, okay? Because, we still have to overcome our doubts and fears and all the things. Right now, the world is facing a lot of bad things, but we need to be mindful that that God is working for good even now. Did I say last week about our kids and our grandkids, and we worry about them going through these times? Mm-hmm. However, God appointed them to this time, just like he appointed us to this time. Remember what he said to Esther, you were born for such a time as this. And if God appointed our kids and grandkids for this time, it was for a purpose, and he will be with them through this time. And I think, because sometimes I'm thinking, okay, especially I guess with a new grandbaby coming, it's like things are so bad. Gosh, I remember before I had my children thinking, I don't know that I want to have a child that has to go through this world. Y'all may have had similar feelings, because It's hard. Life's not fun sometimes for us or them, right? Um, but we need to remember who's in charge and that he is one that we can trust with our very lives. He's the one that laid down his life that we might have eternity with him. So we need to take our eyes off the circumstances and instead seek to see what good God is working to produce through the current trial. And y'all, you're not always going to see it. When you first got cancer, you sure couldn't see any good at all. I could imagine. But what kind of spiritual, we need to look not what's going on, but what kind of spiritual growth is God producing through that circumstance? Did it produce spiritual growth? Yes. By the hardest, huh? We didn't say it was fun. At all. And how much spiritual growth is God producing in the body of believers today in the way the world is right now? You know, because no believer can be comfortable with the state of the world at this point. And so what kind of spiritual growth is he producing through these things? As we endure the trials, okay? So I'm not saying as we endure the beautiful mornings. There are beautiful mornings just about every morning. But, you know, then there's the trials of the day. What new ministries are being formed or strengthened through what's going on today? What about the unhelpful trends in the church and the wrong attitudes that are being extinguished by what God is doing around us today? So we just need to try to see the bigger picture of...
I do feel like, like with Colin, for instance, because they really are into the church, I feel like he has more of an urgency to spread the word because of the obvious end time signs. So he actively, even though it's out of his comfort zone, like it is everybody that I know of, there's only a few that I would say it's not, but he actively pursues that. So it's very important to him. Yes, I visibly see him doing that. So I think he's not the only one.
Oh yeah.
I just feel like that's just a common. There's more of an urgency to get out there.
And it says, how many new opportunities has the Lord created to share the gospel? Well, even like Kim, last weekend, you had an urgency to at least share, to just let them know there's something else out there. And only time will tell what God is doing. We cannot evaluate our present circumstances, probably, you know, because we only have this glimmer that God gives us. And maybe we can, you know, maybe he'll give us insight, maybe he won't. But we can rely on our faith, knowing that God's good is at work. So that's the thing we can rely on. Doesn't feel good, doesn't look good, don't see anything good about it, but my God is overall. If he was overall when Jesus was being killed, he's overall right now. And what we're really talking about here, it's hard to embrace this truth intellectually, because again, it doesn't line up with human values, if you will. We must understand the circumstances of our life, and I already said this, will not always seem good. If you haven't faced a real tragedy, you will. That is part of life in a sinful world. And it's almost a promise that we're going to go through it, but we're not going to go through it alone. No one goes through this life unscathed, and difficulties are unavoidable consequences. And these are all consequences of living in a fallen world. Again, we just don't have to do it alone. Jesus told us to have courage in the midst of these things, knowing where is the source of peace. Any other sources of peace y'all know about? Have you found one?
I thought it would be cheesecake, but it didn't work out.
Some people think it's in alcohol or drugs, but
Well, that's the only place they find what they think is solace. That's the only place they find where they can forget for a moment what's really going on around them.
Yeah.
Is in drugs or alcohol, or maybe it's a pain pill, or maybe it's eating chocolate cake that you can forget about your circumstances for a few minutes. You hear what I'm saying? It could be any of those things.
Yeah.
Maybe it's Facebook. It could be any of those things. John 16:33.
These things I have spoken to you, so that in me you may have peace. In the world you have tribulation, but take courage. I have overcome the world.
Jesus has overcome the world. It meant he took the worst the world could offer him, and he died. But that's not the end of the story. And he came back to life. Okay? He took the worst the world could offer, and then he showed us our future. By being resurrected, he showed us that we too will gain that resurrection. Jesus will never again be subjected to evil and hurt of the world. He has overcome it all. At this point, he has overcome. And we too have overcome. Now, I say that we're in the process, but in the end, we have overcome. It's a done deal in heaven. Your name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. It's a done deal. We just have to get there to that other side.
So this is spoken before he's crucified. And so I wonder, what is Satan thinking? Is it on this, because he's saying I have overcome, but here it is in the background, man, we're about to get him.
I think Satan really thinks he might have him this time. Okay, when Satan did the tempting of Jesus, his whole purpose was for Jesus to sin so that he could then be leader. He could be God. Satan could be God. I think that he keeps thinking, okay, I got him this time. I got him this time. But remember, in Genesis, he was told, no, he's going to get you. Mm-hmm. So he's thinking that, and he's plotting against it, and that makes him even more evil, I think. But in the back of his head, he knows.
He gets a lot of rope.
He gets a lot of rope. And he takes a lot of people down with him, mm-hmm. and he harms every Christian he can by different means. He's attacking us. Even if it's just in our mind, but man, where are the attacks? Where do you spend most of your attack time? Between the two ears, right? Mm-hmm. If you could control those thoughts and those feelings in your head, whew, that is the battleground. That's the spiritual battleground. Now, I don't mean there's not other things you battle, in the world, but you have to battle them through the brain. It can be a challenge.
Yeah, I always think our lessons apply to something that happened to me during the week. I always think it's hitting me. But I will tell Kaylee, because Garrett gets under her skin a lot, and he did something this week, and I was like, I just don't know why you let him get under your skin. He does that to bother you, and it bothers you. I don't understand why, but that's the same thing. We know that. Why do we let Satan get to us? Why do we let him do that? And if we just stood back, we know it's Satan. But we still, how do you not let him get under your skin?
Yeah, how do I not yell after after I just dumped all the noodles in the sink or something? You know what I'm saying? How do I not yell in that moment of frustration?
Yeah.
But what God tells us, and he tells us exactly how to battle it. He says, take every thought captive. In other words, all the thoughts that come through that are not of benefit to us, take them captive and give them to him. In other words, don't let them fester in your head. And I'm not going to tell you that I can do that every single time. I will tell you this, though. I'm better than I was 4 months ago. Are you? I mean, that's what we're to be practicing, that taking that every thought captive. Because the truth is, that is the spiritual battle, is it not? I mean, I don't mean there's not going to be other things, but that's the one I fight. It's in my head. It's between the two ears. It's my feelings, my anger or my hurt or my whatever you know, whatever the feeling of the day might be.
Well, I wish Terry could take captive of his feelings whenever we're driving, I'm driving. And you're coming up to a place where you have to merge into the other lane and you got all these people coming trying to get up in front of you. He is so horrible. It makes him so mad. He said they had miles back there. They knew this was going to happen. Why are they trying to warn you?
And there might be 100 of them jump up there in front of you.
I know.
So I just put you having to wait that much longer for them because they won't do what's right.
210 is really bad right now for that very thing.
And I know every time we go that way, I'm going to have to listen to
Well, but you know what? Sometimes, Kevin, let me just defend those people that are like me sometimes. Sometimes they don't realize that I'm just thinking, well, why are all these people lined up? Why don't I just take this other lane? And then I get up there and go, oh. And then I feel like a heel because I didn't wait in the line. But sometimes we're just oblivious, Kevin.
I had done before. Got over in that other lane before they couldn't do that.
He'll stop them. I don't
Yeah,
want to
got
ride
over in
him.
that other lane, half and half. That way they couldn't go around you.
I hear you. Okay, let's see where we are.
Does that make me wrong?
Well, you will have to talk to, what do you think?
I'm over here thinking that's how people get killed. You won't know what I think.
I just get in my lane and I get where I'm supposed to be.
So, Keisha says it might be dangerous.
I knew you had
Hey,
to bring that up.
but you know what? I understand your pain and have felt it myself as they're going around me and, you know, you're putting me.
Still pretty strong if you know Jesus, and so it's okay, like, if you die.
This is the man that doesn't see why anybody has to take English in school. You remember the first night we were here?
You gotta bring that back up. She didn't say a word.
She remembers.
Well, we only just found out tonight that you're a hoarder, so.
Who's a holder?
You.
Yeah, the hoarder. You dig stuff back out of the trash. That's hoarding, that's the thing.
A holder? Was not.
Oh,
I might
dear.
use it later on down the road.
Okay, we gotta get on.
Danielle's a counselor if you need help.
Hey, and she's experienced most
All I
problems.
do is- And I won't have nothing.
Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna have to find where I'm at. It says, Jesus, I already said this, Jesus will never again be subjected to the evil or the hurt of the world. He has overcome it. And that's the same future we have when we place our faith in Jesus. We have overcome. Have I already said that? We have overcome. And one day, we will be resurrected as well. And when that day comes, nothing in this world will ever harm us, disappoint us again. The Bible assures us of this. God is the God of resurrection. The key is resurrection. Y'all, if Jesus had not been resurrected, what would that do? How would that impact our faith? You know, so he didn't just die and rise again. Because, you know, if he just died and rose again and then died again, but he was resurrected. That means he went to heaven. That tells us the rest of the next step in the rest of the story. He can turn our suffering into an opportunity for glory, but it's always going to be in that order. What comes before glory? Suffering comes before glory. Romans 8:28 says that our Lord works all things together for the good, meaning things don't start good. I'd never put that in that perspective. God works all things together for the good, but what that tells you is that it doesn't start good. He takes what's out there and he puts it together for the good. What I find profound is we're all in this room together. He takes my bad, your bad, and he works all these things together for each person, and then he does it between us as well. Not just for us, but between us and with every person we come in contact in the world. I used to bring this up, but I can't remember who said it, about believing that every atom that moves doesn't move without God directing every atom. Who said that? Yeah, I've said this before. Does anybody remember who said that? It's somebody famous. Maybe I'll look it up and let y'all know again, because I know I've told you before. Y'all's memory is as good as mine. Okay, let's see. In God's providence, He puts all circumstances to work for a future of eternal good outcome. Only after a period of time are we going to see how God does that and what good He brings out because of it. If you try to judge the outcome of a bad situation too soon, you may feel like God has forgotten you. You know, in other words, it may be a journey, not an instance, if you will. In the midst of your circumstances, you can't always see the good that God is working. And as a matter of fact, you might even get angry at God in the middle of your circumstances. What do y'all think about that, getting angry with God?
Not happy.
Huh?
Not happy.
It may happen during that suffering phase.
I think we're gonna get in trouble.
I wonder, I don't know that I think that we get in trouble for getting angry with God. I think we confess it to Him and tell Him, I'm just mad. I don't understand. I'm mad right now. I feel like you're not in it for me right now. You know, and then you know, right when I said that just now, what does that tell me? What's my perspective? All selfish. And so then God can talk to me at that moment. But so I think, you know, He knows that. If you go through Psalms, you're going to find that people got angry. Jesus said to be angry and sin not. So I think that, you know, God knows we're going to have all these feelings. God got angry, okay? He just doesn't sin after it. But, you know, y'all just heard where my point was coming from myself, selfishness. But I think if we confess it to Him, you're going to get angry.
But he got angry, but he kept his faith. And he kept up his end of the deal, whether he was angry.
Right. He didn't give up and quit and go hurt somebody else because he was hurting. Boy, that's something that a lot of people do. When they are hurt, what do? They hurt others. When Kevin has to wait in line.
Sit there and knit and gripe about it.
He might get in the middle of the lane. Well, no, I'll know it's you next time I'm trying to go.
On the news.
No, but we all do that. I mean, we all have a tendency to do that, especially when you're hurt and you need to get that anger out, and you may attack the person closest to you, huh, John?
That's the way it goes, yeah.
Even though that's not even the person that has anything to do with it. Or you might not attack them. I don't attack you. I just have a bad attitude in front of you, and it hurts his feelings. He wants me to just be.
Bible study Danielle all the time?
Yes.
That's too.
Hey, me too. It doesn't work that way, but God and I have been talking about this lately, of me not getting so frustrated. But you know, I've even said, don't yell. The yell comes out, and then it's done, and then I can do the next step. Did you hear it today? John says he can hear me yell even outside.
It has to be better since you don't have kids at home.
You must be loud, dude.
Oh, when I'm angry, I yell loud. Like when the printer falls on my foot, I yell. There are certain things that frustrate me greatly, and I yell. Or if I make a mistake in the kitchen.
When I go to sleep,
stupid.
Wake up.
So anyway, but I've been trying to work on.
So Danielle scared me once upon a time. I don't even remember what it was over. I just remember Michaela did something and she was angry, and I had never, all I knew was church Danielle. She gets after her pretty good with me in the car, and I was like, it was
do that with your kids? I did it with mine.
Yeah, but I expected it of me. She was here.
Yeah.
Now, she was just one of us.
Yeah, I always was just one of you or lower. But there is this church persona, I guess. The ladies in my Sunday school class go, I can't imagine you ever getting on thinking, because I tell them, I mean,
Just tell them to call me.
okay.
I'll tell them how bad.
Well, and I tell them because they sure don't need to think I'm anything special. I'm just like, I mean, my gosh. I try to confess.
That was the beginning of our friendship, when I knew she was a real person.
I try to confess things even to y'all that I go later. I go, oh Father, I can't believe I said that in front of them. I can't believe they now know what I do and how I really act. But I try to, because it's a battle that we all face. You might not face my particular challenge, but you face one and you lose occasionally, maybe not as often
Well,
as
have
me.
you been video fussing about something? Have you been video fussing about something? I got videos.
No.
But it was, I thought it was pretty good, but
Okay.
Billy was, every time the guy that was spotting me would tell me something, Billy was telling me, and we have headsets on, and, so I said, Billy, I got this, I can see John, I'm good, it takes me a minute to get from here to there. So I stopped and explained to him, please don't do that, and so he just kept doing it. I said, if we weren't 10 foot there, you would be getting out.
And it's on video, huh?
But I got the bucket because my spotter done waved me off, said, you know, I said, one more time. I said, give her beans. I give her beans, and she jumped up there. A little frustration with it, I think.
Yeah. It was that extra.
On the pedal.
Yeah. Okay, let's see where we are.
Okay.
Now that we've confessed that we're just plain old human.
Yeah.
Everything that happens in our life, especially trials and hardships, are part of God's plan A, because he doesn't have a plan B. It is part of his plan. And it's part of his plan to reach that eternal good. So we endure trials, we endure difficulties, knowing that when the trial is over, God will have accomplished his eternal purposes through his providence. Now, that doesn't mean, and we're all going to be okay. It may mean, and I die. It may mean, and I get sick. It may mean something really bad happens to me or my family. It may mean some of those things, but it's part of God's providence, and he's in charge, and he has a plan for it. I used to tell my brother Dale when he had cancer. I didn't used to tell him. I told him one time. I said, I think you've been called to a higher purpose. Dale was a man's man. I mean, he was respected by his friends, and they weren't Christians. His friends typically weren't Christians. But I told him I thought he'd called to a higher purpose when he got cancer, because he was then able to witness and talk to these men that otherwise wouldn't have listened. And as a matter of fact, I found out one of my classmates got saved at Dale's funeral. And I found that out in the last couple of years. And so, you know, and I really did think he was called to a higher purpose, because I at one time thought he was healed, and he wasn't. And, you know, anyway, side story. To me, if you're called to give your life, that's a higher purpose, okay? All right, so Matthew 22:15.
Then the Pharisees went and plotted together how they might trap him in what he said. And they sent their disciples to him, along with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know that you are truthful and teach the way of God in truth, and defer to no one, for you are not partial to any. Then tell us, what do you think? Is it lawful to give a poll tax to Caesar or not?
Okay, remember they're plotting and they're plotting and they're plotting and they're plotting track Jesus any way they can. Well, this is almost like the perfect storm, okay? Because no matter which way he answers, whether he says yes, pay Caesar, or no, don't pay Caesar, he's going to upset about half the crowd. So a yes or a no answer, he's going to be in trouble, and so they think they've got him. He had been embarrassing the Pharisees and Sadducees, but they just knew, now we got him. As a matter of fact, the first set of Pharisees had gone away, and this was kind of a new set of Pharisees. And they came along with the Herodians. Y'all remember the Herodians are the people that thought, it's okay to have Herod as king. We like it. We like how it is. And not only that, they made money because they worked for Herod. So they both were conservative when it came to interpreting scripture, but Pharisees didn't support Rome at all. And of course, the Herodians did support Rome and Herod, the king. So they got together on this question to ask Jesus. As a matter of fact, they're on different sides of the answer here, okay? But they still ask Jesus this question. So it's a devious question, simple but ingenious, almost the perfect trap, except for that, you can't trap God. So this is a long-standing debate, though, among the culture, because I don't want to get ahead of myself. Let's see. One, though, if Jesus says pay the Herod, then all the Jewish people are going to be very upset. And if they say don't pay it, then the Roman people are going to be very upset. So one means he can be stoned by the Jews. The other one means he can be killed by the Romans. They wanted to be sure, though, that Jesus didn't sidestep the question like he did when they asked about John and said, when he said, well, then you're not going to tell me who's had John's authority, then I'm not going to tell you where my authority comes from. So they started with flattery. I thought this was very interesting. And they started saying they know Jesus was truthful in teaching the word and deferred to no one and wasn't partial to anyone. So they're using this flattery. Now, the religious leaders didn't believe what they were saying. They were just trying to put him in a spot where he had to answer. And after that introduction, they thought, well, he's not going to refuse to answer this question because we've already said what a good answerer he is. And so they talk about the poll tax. This is a tax that every person must pay after a certain age to Caesar. And it was a point of contention between the Pharisees and the Herodians, hotly debated among the youth. The poll tax was called a head tax, and it required Rome of everyone living under Roman rule. As a matter of fact, when they went into Passover, isn't that what you had to collect at our showing of Bethlehem? Yeah. Meaning that was his role. He's the tax collector in electoral and sulfur. So this payment, though, when you paid this tax, it was considered by the Jews a personal, Herod considered it a personal tribute to him, or to Caesar. And Mark's gospel actually calls it a tribute tax. Why? Whose picture was on the coin? Caesar. Okay? And so this picture being on the coin was a huge deal for the Jewish people. The Jewish people thought that anytime they saw a picture engraven, that it was an idol. So they didn't even want to touch one of these coins, much less use it to pay their tax. Guess what? Rome wouldn't accept their money, though. So in order to pay this tax, what did they have to get? They had to get this kind of money to pay it. By the way, the Roman Caesar had already said that he was God. He declared himself to be God. So that was even more fuel for the Pharisees not to want to pay this tax. We don't want to touch the coin. We don't want to pay the tax. They felt like they were committing idolatry by paying the tax. The Herodians thought, well, you need to pay the tax because that's the law. And in fact, God has shared that they are to follow the law. They are to follow the law. They took a very dim view if you didn't pay your taxes. So the Herodians would have taken the case of Jesus to Pilate, and in fact, later on, they did tell Pilate that Jesus told the people not to pay the tax. Well, he didn't, but they told him that. And if Jesus said pay the tax, well, then you're supporting idolatry. They were just trying to make Jesus lose his credibility. The questions seemed to be, like I said, the perfect question. So let's look and see what happened. Matthew 22:18.
But Jesus perceived their malice and said, "Why are you testing me, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the poll tax." And they brought him a denarius. And he said to them, "Whose likeness and inscription is this?" They said, "Caesar's." Then he said to them, "Then render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." And hearing this, they were amazed, and leaving him, they went away.
Okay. Notice they had used flattery. I've never heard this before, but it's so true. Flattery is a socially acceptable way of lying. And Jesus wasn't going to have any part of it. Y'all, have we ever used that to ease a situation? I might have. I don't know. I try not to. I try to make observations, but not give compliments unless the compliment has been earned. But have you ever had it used on you?
Oh, yeah.
Flattery, try to get what they want from you.
Oh, yeah.
Just think of a salesperson. I mean, just
I was thinking of drugheads.
a drughead. Yeah.
Hey, beautiful.
I need you to fill this prescription, for which I don't have one. Yeah. Okay, so they had no sincere interest in Jesus's advice. So to say, you're good at giving good answers, that was just a ploy to trap Jesus. Again, to make him answer in front of everybody. I've already explained about the coin and what it had on it. And that Rome would not accept any other currency other than that currency. So it put them in a bind. They had to touch it. So when Jesus asked for the coin, they didn't have one right there at the time. They're in the temple at this moment teaching. So they didn't have one because they didn't want that money to come into the temple. But what did they have out at the money changers' tables? They had those coins. So someone had to go get a coin from out there and bring it in. And so, and Jesus asked them to do that on purpose. He asked them to go get it on purpose. Jesus knew whose picture was on it. So there was the image, and then he told them whose picture's on this coin. I've covered a lot of that already. Let's see. By the way, so he answers, then render to Caesar what is Caesar's. The Greek word translated render means to give back. So what he's really saying is, then give back to Caesar what is Caesar's. I never heard that definition. Give back to Caesar what's Caesar's. Pharisees simply all they had to do is give it back. What did the coin mean to the Pharisees at this time? Nothing. I mean, they didn't even want to touch it, right? So it meant really nothing to them. In a sense, it was worthless to the Pharisees. So Jesus says, give Caesar back what's his, and you need not worry that you are showing Caesar honor. Remember they thought they would be worshiping Caesar as God by giving the coin. But if it meant nothing to them, then they weren't worshiping him. They were just giving back what was his. So I'm sure the Pharisees did not like that explanation, but boy, did it fit to a T. There was no sacrifice involved in them giving that coin, that denarius, back to Caesar. They didn't want it. They didn't want to use it. So they were returning something to Caesar that already belonged to him. But that also meant there was no sacrifice because it already belonged to Caesar. There was no sacrifice from the Pharisee standpoint. And because there was no sacrifice, they weren't honoring Caesar. When we worship God, it requires a sacrifice. And the sacrifice may just be our time. You know, it may be our thoughts. It may be, but it requires a sacrifice. And I've said before, if you ever have a relationship, any real relationship requires sacrifice. If you don't sacrifice, there's not a real relationship going on. It requires that give and take. So if we give a tribute or honor to someone and we make no sacrifice, we are not worshiping. Whew. Does that mean if you gave a donation and it wasn't a sacrifice, it's not worshiping? Just thought I'd throw that out there. It may not be. You might have just given a donation. And I don't mean to quantify that at all. I'm just saying that sometimes, you know what? Sometimes the easiest thing to do is throw money at it, whatever it may be.
Instead of your time.
Instead of your time or whatever else God might call you to do. And I'm not, that's my thought, okay? I'm not bringing that out there as the Bible study saying it. That's what I'm saying. Because I asked myself that question whenever I was studying this. If it's not a sacrifice, am I honoring God? Or am I just throwing money at it, you know? So Jesus sidestepped the trap, as usual. He eliminated the conflict between paying the tax and honoring God. And because it meant nothing to the Pharisees, that money, as far as the coin, now I'm sure the value of that coin did mean something to them, okay? Because, you know, they had to change money for it, their money for it. But it wasn't dishonoring God because it was of no value to them. They didn't give it up for the Caesar, so it wasn't dishonoring God. And the Pharisees and all the Jews could make the payment without compromising their standing under the law, because that's what they worried about, breaking the law. Now, the crowd was amazed when they heard this answer, because they knew too that this is a trap, and Jesus just got out of it. Jesus adds that they should, now, not only did he say, render unto Caesar what is Caesar, and what did he say next? And render to God the things that are God. What things do we render or return to God? What should we give to God?
Our time, our worship, our tithes, everything we should give to him.
That's exactly right. Our obedience as well, our praise. We are to render. Now, which one of those things were the Pharisees doing that you just named? They weren't. They were so busy trying to keep the law, trying not to be an idolater, trying not to touch a coin that had Caesar's. They were so busy trying to follow the rules from their perspective, they failed to worship, praise, or obey God.
This one sentence that he says, this is what self-righteousness looks like, is judging ourselves by meaningless standards instead of being subject to God's standards. That is profound.
Yes. And we all do it, don't we? Yes. Okay, Romans 12:1.
Therefore I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. Amen.
So the leaders were worried about extending Caesar too much honor. Meanwhile, they weren't honoring God at all. They were enemies of God, actively opposing the Son of God, and they led the people away from recognizing the Messiah. They were being hypocritical, needless to say, worried about handling a Roman coin. Hey, they were worried about touching that Roman coin, all the while plotting to kill the Messiah. Okay? Talk about misplaced thoughts. They were engaged in an ungodly conspiracy against God while arguing over how to please God with worthless currency. So, they were oblivious to the need to serve God through a life of obedience to His Word, not to the law or what they had come up with as their definition of what His Word was, but to just be obedient to what God would ask them to do. The Lord wants His people to set a good example. Now, y'all, God calls us to follow the law. As a matter of fact, whoever our president is, whether you like him or not, guess who put him in that position? God did. I've said this before. Who was Caesar whenever Paul was executed? Whenever Paul was in jail? Nero. Who put Nero in control of Rome at that time? God did. Mm-hmm. And you know, and when I look at some of our situations and get frustrated or angry about it, I think, man, we've not been put under that kind of rule. I mean, Nero burned Christians for life in the streets. You know, we've not been put under that kind of rule. But in fact, God is the one. And the reason I'm making that point, God wants us to follow the law. And if there's any way possible, we are to follow the law. The only time we're excused from following the law is if it directly causes us to disobey God. Okay? So let's just pull up abortion, because that's a huge one these days. I'm sure probably nobody in this room supports abortion. Yet it is the law of the land right now. Well, I don't know, it's kind of confusing where it stands right now, doesn't it? But I don't know where I'm going with that. Let me formulate the thought.
I did just see in the news about they're going to be sending abortion bills, but I just saw a headline.
What is
it? They're trying to block it coming to Louisiana.
Oh, good.
And, but pharmacies have to stock it. It still has to be available. We don't have to stock it, so it is a choice.
Oh, you don't have to stock it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
They cannot make us sell or do anything that we're not comfortable doing.
Okay.
But I have heard too, I've read so many businesses that tries to stand up for that kind of thing, or even against the transgenders or whatever. But they've been persecuted, they've lost their businesses, they've lost their money. Yeah, so it's going to come to that.
That's just
Persecution.
that's the ones that's up there pushing all that stuff, one doing all that.
Yeah.
I just like to get what the after morning
Right.
feeling wrong, you think? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, well, see, that one is like birth control, basically. The one they're talking about is where there's an actual formed fetus heartbeat.
Yeah, I was reading about that the
All
other
that.
day.
The Plan B, it's never a formed baby, but they're talking about actually aborting a baby now.
I thought the morning natural was aborting a baby.
No, it's just a high dose of the birth control pill. It keeps the egg from attaching to the uterus wall, so there's never a baby. It's no worse than birth control.
That's not what I always thought.
No, but this is a whole other step they're talking about.
Yeah, okay. And I don't know, I didn't formulate my thought long enough a while ago, and it probably wasn't a great example on the abortion, so just y'all erase that one from your head, because I can't explain it at this point. Let's see. My point was going to be, though, God calls us to follow the law as long as it does not oppose Him directly in what He says for us to do. There's going to be some laws out there that we are not comfortable with. But if it doesn't cause us to do something against His rule, then we are to, abide by it. Okay. And Steve tells us if we're patient enough, we can probably find a way around so that we can follow the law and not disobey God too, Romans 13:1.
Every person is to be in subjection to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. Therefore, whoever resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God, and they who have opposed will receive condemnation upon themselves.
So, and Steve says, when we resist the government at every opportunity, we fool ourselves in that we're obeying God, because God calls us to honor the government. Okay, we might not like it, we might not agree with it, but we are to follow the rules as much as possible, unless, again, it's in direct conflict with what God says. I think of people that have gone and fought for abortion and they get arrested. They have to go through the steps of being arrested. They are following the law by submitting to the penalties. And there's some people that know when they go, I will submit to the penalty because that's what the law says. Not because I think it's right, but because that's what the law says.
Like, in a Hitler situation, wiping out a whole race of people, I would hope that we would not, that's when we would stand up and against the government.
We're not to take the easy way out. We're not to seek self-righteousness. Our responsibility is to wear the image of Christ. Just like as if, the coin, Caesar's image was on the coin. God's image is to be upon us. And that's what the world is to see, his image upon us. We're to wear that imprint on our very bodies. Make your lives a living sacrifice, remembering that we will celebrate resurrection because Jesus was resurrected. And he made that ultimate sacrifice that we can be resurrected as well. Any other thoughts? Y'all can say whatever you want.